Hello there, people of the internet. So this is a completely hypothetical situation. It is just one of those things that I wonder about and ask myself about and am not quite certain how to even describe the situation. But with lack of a better way to express what it is that I'm talking about here, one of my favorite things to do is to kind of ask myself these what-if situations. And I asked myself this what-if situation, what if we could only own bolt actions, or maybe technology never advanced beyond bolt actions, maybe self-loading automatic firearms never became a thing in some alternate universe, and we're still rocking bolt action rifles that are utilizing a full power rifle cartridge. I was just kind of over here asking myself, if I could only own a bolt action rifle, and I could only own one, which one would I own? And I have a vast collection of all different sorts of military surplus firearms. Perhaps if I was like in the early 1940s. Honestly, I feel like I was born in the wrong time era. I would have loved to have been my age in the 1940s. If that meant I had to go over to Europe and kick Jerry's ass, so be it. Shove my foot so far up there, the lump of his neck's gonna wiggle whenever I move my toes around. But let's say, you know, I was in that time period, or technology never progressed beyond that, or something like that, and the civilian ownership was only able to own bolt-action rifles. This is just one of the scenarios that I was kind of thinking about because I have so many to pick from, and I narrowed it down to, well, I'm keeping it what I have. I mean, there's way more options out there, but I'm keeping it to what I have. Some sort of bolt-action rifle that fires a full power cartridge round, typically, you know, used predominantly by first world countries until after World War II. And I came up with a couple of really good options. First off, it would have to be some sort of carbine style rifle, meaning shorter than the normal infantry rifle that was issued, just because in my particular case, I can't shoot well beyond 100 yards. I'm over here shooting at like 40 and still not quite as accurate as I'd like to be. But the extra accuracy you would gain from a longer barreled rifle is just something that does not appeal to me, because I would not be able to utilize that accuracy at all. And the power behind a full power cartridge, it is more than sufficient to make up for the drop in velocity that you get from having a shorter barrel. So some sort of carbine length or carbine style version of the standard long rifle that would typically be used during that time period. Now, this right here is not one used during that time period, but it is a good representation of what I'm going to use. This right here, well, this is a representation of the representation. This is one that I was strongly considering. This right here is a Santa Fe Jungle Carbine. This right here is a number 5 lookalike. Not actually a number 5, but for all intensive purposes, this is what we're going to use. The number 5 didn't come around until like later on in the time period, but it still falls into the category that I'm talking about, meaning a shorter barreled, handier little carbine version of a full power, full length rifle that was used by many people, predominantly the British in their colonies. But this here is a 1943 production number 1 that was transformed into a jungle carbine. This right here was originally going to be my first choice, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I love this thing. I very much enjoy this little carbine. This would have been my first choice, but there's a couple of downsides to it. One, 10-round magazine versus 5-round magazines. Yes, I know. A lot of times it's seen to being upside, but I cannot take this rifle hunting, at least not legally, in many areas without modifying the magazine. I can make it shoot 5 rounds. It's not that difficult to do so, but I still see that as a drawback. The muzzle brake on this thing makes the concussive blast not nearly as bad on myself. I'm going to point that out right now. If you are firing full power cartridges out of a shorter length rifle, the concussive blast is far worse than what you would fire out of a longer or standard barreled rifle. But basically all of that I can look past. The one thing that makes me not pick this right here, if this was like 2017, I would have picked this right here, but times have changed. 303 British ammunition is expensive and difficult to find. Right now, basically, all of it is surplus that will pretty much be unreliable from where it is that it's coming from. I cannot 100% state that because I have not tested all of it out, but from what I can gather, it's pretty much going to be unreliable military surplus. Good for components, good for loading, but I prefer things that I can buy bulk ammunition for and shoot regularly, and this right here is just not something that I can do that with, at least not right now. There are companies out there making modern day 303 British ammunition, but not nearly as much as the demand is calling for. A bunch of Enfield rifles were recently imported into the country and sold off for pretty damn cheap, and as a result, people bought a lot of 303 British ammunition, and the price on them absolutely skyrocketed. Maybe that'll change in the future, maybe down the road. I mean, I remember there was a point in time where 303 British ammunition was actually cheaper and easier to get than 7.62 by 54 rimmed, and that's saying something. But maybe down the road, the ammunition will become more available, and I'll be able to actually utilize this rifle more. Now, just because of the situation that we're having with the ammunition, I did not bring out any ammunition to run this rifle down on the range, but you guys have seen me run this rifle plenty. As a matter of fact, I'll go ahead and splice in some footage of me actually running this rifle from a different video, so I don't have to actually burn ammunition in this one. But it's a cock-on close Enfield action. I mean, everything is the same as, you know, a #1 Mark III, because it's literally a #1 Mark III that's just been turned into a jungle carbine. It's been basically sporterized to look like a jungle carbine, and this right here would have been my #1. Let me show you guys what was a very, very, very close second, and my God, I insist whenever I say very close second. I'm still thinking about like changing my answer here and making this one my #1. This right here is the Troop Special Carcano. A lot of these were imported into the country from various different places. This one right here is actually a very good example. Is that the word I'm looking for? Very good example of this right here. But this is just going to be a representation. Basically, any of your shorter carbine Carcanos or Carcanos, however it is that you want to pronounce that. Basically, any of your shorter Carcano rifles would fall into this category. The Troop Special, everybody knows that they chop the barrel off. They use gain twist rifling, and whenever you chop the barrel off, it doesn't quite stabilize the bullet as much. So out at like 200 to 300 yards, you start having accuracy issues with these rifles. Like I said, I'm barely shooting accurately at 100 yards. So the loss of accuracy at 200 and 300 and etc., literally does not affect me at all, because there's no way I'd be able to hit my target anyway. Maybe if I miss, that flying bullet that is not stabilized anymore will go off in one direction or the other and actually hit my target. But this was such a close second, but there's a couple of major downsides for this one. Anyone who's ever shot basically a carbine Carcano in 6.5 knows just how absolutely pleasurable they are to shoot. This is an extremely short, lightweight, handy little rifle. Like, I can lug this thing around absolutely all day, every day, and have no problems whatsoever. I could bring this quite a fair distance through the woods. I could do a lot of maneuvering with this thing, and it is so short. This thing's got to be, hell, 3 feet long, if that. Let me see. It is quite a deal shorter than the other carbines that I have brought out here today. And being chambered in 6.5, the recoil on it is exceptionally nice, and the concussive blast is basically non-existent, despite the fact that the rifle is so short. Like I said, anyone who's ever fired one of these knows just how nice they are to shoot. That being said, anyone who's bought one of these knows just how expensive they are to shoot. Carcano ammunition is one of those things that is not readily available, especially because a lot of these were imported into the country, and this already expensive unavailable round shot up in price significantly. And now, if you find it, it is quite a deal more expensive than it used to be. I'm also not a fan of the fact that you need a clip in order to load this thing. And if you don't have one and you just shove one into the chamber, you risk breaking your extractor. But you need a clip in order to load this thing more than just one round. And if you do one round single loading, like I said, you'll break your extractor. Not really something that you want in a rifle if it is the only rifle that you're going to have for the rest of your life. So the feeding system is definitely, I'd say, probably the thing that moved me from moving this to my first choice, you know, down to my second choice. It is zeroed out for 200 yards whenever you hold. I made a whole video on aiming down the sights on your Carcano. Whenever you hold the top of your rear or your front sight down to the bottom notch of your rear sight, it zeroes out to 200 meters, I believe, if memory serves me correctly. But it is entirely adjustable, you know, just like all of your other military style rifles from this time period. Completely adjustable rear sight to, you know, make up for elevation, windage adjustable in the front if you're having accuracy issues. But these things had accuracy issues out beyond 200 to 300 yards. Like I said, I'm not shooting beyond that. Just because of the extremely lightweight, compact nature of this thing, man, it was a close second, even with the feeding system. But being able to load XYZ amount of rounds into that Enfield without needing some sort of external clip to be able to do that, that is what made the Enfield my number one. That and the aperture sights on this thing. As a blind person, nearsighted, aperture sights just work better than the V-notch sights that are out further away on the barrel. I'm very much happy that this number one conversion here did not maintain the leaf sight on it, and they instead stuck in some aperture sights. Makes it easier for me to use. Now let me use the two carbine length rifles that I actually brought out here that are legitimately viable, that are basically the only options that I decided to really put my time, effort, and thought into. This one is a very nice one. This one is an M44 Mosin-Nagant carbine. Very, very good option. If we are talking about the scenario that I was talking about, this right here would not be a bad way to go. Not quite at the time period that I was talking about, but the same general concept is, I mean, these existed in different carbine forms, but not necessarily the M44 existed in that specific time period. But the rules I have given are more like guidelines more than they are rules. I'm putting these on right here because I actually have some ammunition out here for this thing right here that we're going to go ahead and run. Now, the M44 carbine, anyone who's ever shot one of these, takes a full power 7.62 by 54 rimmed cartridge, and my god, the concussive blast is absolutely terrible. Loads from stripper clips. These stripper clips absolutely suck. Even the ones that are half decent still kind of suck because it's a rimmed cartridge, and pushing rimmed cartridges into a rifle from a stripper clip is just never a fun option, no matter what rifle it is that you're using. So, heavy rifle in comparison to some of the other rifles like this M44 is significantly heavier than this Troop Special. This has significantly more concussive blast because the round is quite a deal bit more powerful than the 6.5 Carcano. Quite a bit more recoil too. There's a lot of things I really like about this M44, but a lot of things that I don't like. And just because it is too much for a little handy carbine like this, the concussive blast and the force and the amount of effort it takes to load a stripper clip into the rifle, having a rimmed cartridge, this does have a magazine cutoff, so I don't have to worry about rim lock for the most part. There are some occasions where it just barely gets to me. I'm not too concerned about the bayonet being attached to the rifle because this is more or less me just talking about a carbine length Mosin-Nagant. This would be a very good option, but it would not be my first pick just because of all the things that I've stated so far. Rimmed cartridge, full power, very powerful concussive blast, absolutely devastating. Back during this time period, hearing protection was not really too big of a deal, too big of a thing. The single stack magazine is also not something that I like because you have this magazine that juts out right there. Doesn't really seem like that big of a deal until you go actually using one of these, and I tell you what, having one of these on my back with this big magazine right here, you notice it whenever you're walking through the woods and whatnot versus something like with a flat magazine like on a Mauser. But this right here, this was a very, very close call. This would be my number one if I didn't have that right there, which I will show here in a second. So before I show that, I'm at the gun range, and I actually have ammo for this one. So let's go ahead, send some rounds downrange, because why the hell not? Oh my goodness. Boy, oh boy. Now I'm remembering just how gnarly this rifle is. I forgot about it for a little while, just because I haven't shot it in forever. My God. Every time I shoot this thing, I can see the sun come out the front of the barrel. Now, I cannot imagine fighting house to house with one of these things. Like in World War II, they had, like, this was what the Russian infantry were using. The 9130 version of this, at least. Still a massive concussive blast, man. I cannot imagine. And a lot of them did have these carbine length rifles. There was the M38, I believe, was a carbine length. The M27, I believe, was also carbine length, but it was more of a cavalry carbine than anything else. But carbine, M1 carbines, M1 Mosin, why did I say M1? Mosin carbines did exist during World War II. Oh my goodness. I don't really know what I'm aiming at. I have a radio tower out there, and that's just, it's made of particle wood, so my bullets are going right through it. Let's go for the steel. There we go. I think I hit the steel. Yeah, I see a darker spot on the steel. My God, this Mosin. This would be an excellent little carbine if the round it fired was not dramatically overpowered, overpressured. 7.62 by 54 rimmed, at least for right now, is still readily available. There's other companies that are going to pop up and start making it. There's the Russian ammo ban that kind of stopped a mass surplus of 7.62 by 54 rim from coming into the country, or at least it will in the next couple of years. Right now, still readily available. You can still get it pretty damn cheap, but that supply is going to be limited. Let me show you what my actual first pick would be. A lot of you guys have seen this very numerously on this channel. This right here is my Avito Mauser, rechambered in 7.62 Set-Me, but it can fire 7.62 NATO just fine. Originally, these rifles were chambered in 7mm Mauser, and whenever Spain got involved with NATO, they weren't sure if their Mauser rifles could handle 7.62 NATO, so they made their own proprietary round, 7.62 Set-Me, dimensionally identical to 7.62 NATO, just shooting at a far lower pressure. But over time, these rifles have very, very much proved that they can handle 7.62 NATO ammunition. Now, this right here is an extraordinarily lightweight little rifle. 5-round internal magazine, very comfortable, smooth action. I don't necessarily like the sights on it just because I prefer aperture sights, but the only bolt-action rifles I have that have aperture sights are my Enfields. And those are, getting ammunition for those are not very easy to do right now. I do have a 7.7 Jap Arasaka that also has an aperture sight on it, but I am better off getting 303 British ammunition than I am for that. So this right here is probably my best option. Not quite the shortest rifle I have, not quite the most lightweight rifle that I have, but it is definitely a good pick. I think the biggest selling point for this rifle, like I said, not quite as short, not quite as lightweight, but 7.62 NATO ammunition is very readily available, and it is something, at least for now, that I can get for not a lot of money. So I have me a stripper clip here with 7.62 NATO ammunition on it, but these are a non-rimmed cartridge, which makes loading them into the rifle way easier than loading rimmed cartridges into a rifle. That is a very big perk for this. Now, these Avito Mausers, they're 93 Mauser action, they're Carcano close action, so they're a lot like the Enfield with that aspect. It has basically a 2-stage trigger on it to where you pull the trigger back until you hit a wall, and then you break through the wall and it fires the round. Now let's go ahead and send some lead downrange. Oh, Nelly. Every time I fire this thing, I get kind of mixed feelings about it. The concussive blast is not nearly as bad as an M44, but it is still worse than firing 7.62 NATO ammunition from a full-length cartridge. But then I think about the really short, like AR-10 style carbines that we have nowadays. firing this ammunition. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't so bad. The main selling point of this rifle on me is definitely the ammunition. Being able to get 7.62 NATO ammunition for not a lot of money, at least right now. So if I had to pick one out of the ones that I own using just the settings that I have described so far, I smell fire. I don't see fire, but I smell fire. Then this right here would probably be what I would pick. The variety of ammunition is very limited just because 7.62 NATO ammunition is, well, it's a military round. They only make basically one spec of it with the exception of like specialty ammunition and whatnot. So if I wanted to take this hunting or, you know, use soft point ammunition or something like that, I would have to load my own ammunition, which I'm not against. I've done it before. But in terms of having a rifle to actually use, 7.62 NATO ammunition is, like I said, something that I can get my hands on pretty regularly. And that would make content like this very easy to do, as it does. Now the ammunition that I fire normally runs around 150 grains, you know, 147 to 150 depending on what it is that I'm actually shooting. And out of a rifle like this, which is not quite as short as some of the other rifles that I have and not quite as light as some of the other rifles I have, it helps with recoil and concussive blast a lot, although it is still there. This is just a good compromise. I could still carry this one around pretty easily for a pretty fair distance. Not quite as far as I could carry around my Carcano here, Carcano, whatever it is that you want to pronounce it as. The weight and size difference is significant between the two rifles, and the 6.5 caliber cartridge in this one is way more pleasurable to shoot than the 7.62 NATO cartridge in this one. I want to get one of these rifles in 7mm Mauser. I feel like that would be like the ultimate rifle because 7mm Mauser is still one of those cartridges that you can get your hands on pretty easily if you look around. It's a little bit more expensive than 7.62 NATO, but it is way more comfortable to shoot. These rifles, like 7.62 NATO, is just pushing this thing to basically its limits, and we're getting to the realm of it being uncomfortable, but it's not quite there yet. Let me know what you guys think down below, and let me know what you guys' choices are. I imagine that people out there are going to have something to say about this. The parameters I'm using are pretty damn loose, but I think it's pretty evident of the type of rifle that it is that I'm speaking about. So like I said, let me know what y'all have to say down below, what your choices are out of the things I have here, or out of the things that you have, or out of the various other things that I have. I should do a video on like everything I have at this point, because my collection has grown to be quite extensive. So thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content, like the video if you like the video, and down in the description below we have a link to all sorts of goodies. Go ahead and go check that out, and I have some place to be. So thanks for watching. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garen. Shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.